Can you see my presentation?
Yes, yes, you are ready now. Yes.
Okay. So thank you so much for allowing us to present on Allegra. I've listened to the presentations and I can start by answering the last question that was addressed during the session before I start my presentation. So we fracture the valve after implantation of the Allegra. That is typically the standard. You can of course fracture the surgical valve before if you want, but the majority of cases that we've done is typically a fracture of the valve after the Allegra implantation, and that is pretty much routine when we do our valve-in-valve cases. So again, let me come back to my presentation. I'm Jonsson. I am a medical affairs director with Biosensors since 2 years, and I was asked to give a short presentation on Allegra and valve-in-valve in particular, but also addressing the hemodynamics of our valve. So this is what I wanted to talk about. I wanted to talk about small annulus and in particular valve-in-valve. I wanted to mention something on our new delivery system that is soon coming, and also some modification that is underway for the Allegra valve. So this is a picture of the evolution of the Allegra, if you wish. It's been tested, and the engineers in Hechingen in Germany has been working on this for a long time. You can see the final result on the lower right-hand side. That's the final Allegra design. So we have our R&D facility in Hechingen, that's outside Stuttgart. It was opened, the new building was opened in 2024. We have the head office in Morges in Switzerland. So there are a couple of things with the Allegra valve that we're quite happy with, that we don't want to change at all. It's a supraannular design. It has a cylindrical stent frame shape, and it's a supraannular construction of the valve. The frame has radiopaque markers, which indicates where the radial force is. So you have a greater radial force in the inflow portion as compared to the outflow portion that is slightly more flexible as compared to our competitors. These radiopaque markers can help you when you do your positioning and also when you do commissure alignment. It's a bovine pericardium that was mentioned by the previous speaker. So, you know, when you talk about hemodynamics of a TAVI prosthesis, you know, the question is, of course, how do you assess this and how do you evaluate the differences in hemodynamics? And you can do it in two ways. You can do it in vitro, bench testing basically. You can check gradients, you can check Reynolds shear stresses, you can check different washout rates in the sinuses and in the neosinuses if you have a valve-in-valve situation. And then, of course, you can look at the in vivo results, the clinical trials, you know, gradients, effective orifice areas, and ppm rates. When you talk about bench testing, there's been quite extensive bench testing. This is a picture that was provided to us actually by an independent group in Canada, where they compared some of the competitors, the Allegra, the Sapien, Evolute, and what you can probably appreciate in this image is that you have quite a stable opening of the Allegra with very little turbulence when it's open. So we believe this is a design feature that gives us a stable leaflet opening, a great effective orifice area opening. So there has also been independent testing on the turbulence, if you wish. I mean, I'm not an engineer, but the engineers, when they talk about turbulence, they talk about Reynolds shear stresses. And in this independent test, Allegra actually has had the lowest Reynolds shared stresses, that is the lowest turbulence in these tests. Another thing, if you look at the valve-in-valve procedure, you can look at the washout in the sinuses. And you ask yourself, why is this important? Where there are speculations that the durability of the valve it could hinge on the stagnation of flow in the sinuses. That leads to pannus, that leads to subclinical valve thrombosis, and so on and so on. There's nothing proven, but it's an indicator. And we saw also in these tests, again, independent tests, not performed by us, but by academic centers, that we actually had the lowest, we had the best washout of the sinuses and in the neosinuses. So what about in vivo? What about in clinical trials? Well, we have actually done accumulation of all the hemodynamic findings that we've seen in the trials and also in the registries, and we constantly have very low gradients in small anatomies and in valve, and that is probably the reason why approximately 15 to 20% of all our procedures are actually valve procedures now when we do them in our registries. And we have quite a library. It's also, as you probably well know, becoming increasingly important to be able to address valve because some of the TAVI procedures are coming back. So we're talking TAVI and TAVI as well. And this is also a go-to valve when it comes to TAVI and TAVI. And what we've seen, of course, is that we get very low patient-prosthesis mismatch because of our great effective office areas and low gradients. And, you know, of course, in valve, PVL is rarely a big problem, whereas PPM is a big problem. So you got to ask yourself, what are you trading? What are you trading when you're planning a procedure for these patients who need a second valve? So that was a little bit about small annulus and valve with Allegra. I want to mention quickly some of the investigator-initiated trials that is ongoing. It's the VIVAL 2, and that is a randomized controlled study between SAPIEN and the Allegra. It's being performed, the principal investigator is Dr. Moreno in La Paz. It's going to be head-to-head between SAPIEN and Allegra. This is the flow chart, so it's a one-to-one randomization, and the primary endpoint is going to be mean gradient on echo at 30 days. There's another study that is addressing women who typically have small annuluses. It's pretty much the same design, clinical trial design. It's going to be SAPIEN against Allegra in the smaller anatomies. This is the flow chart, so it's going to be one-to-one randomization, Allegra versus SAPIEN. The primary endpoint is going to be the same, mean gradient at 30 days on echo. So that's what's going on in terms of patients who are in need of a TAVI and have a small annulus or have a previous surgical valve implanted. I wanted to mention just quickly on the new delivery system that we're working on. This was a delivery system that was has been subjected to a clinical trial called the Empire 1 study. It's our second generation delivery system. It allows for full repositioning. We completed it, so the last patient in was in November in 2023. We met the primary endpoint, which was work 2 device success. The final result is going to be presented at London Valves this year. The CRO for this study was Kourkoveli. It is a delivery system that has a more conventional design with a hydrophilic coated catheter, and you have stop lock position, so 80% of the valve is exposed before you decide to go for final release, and you can resheet and reposition if you want to. The feedback has been quite good on this system. Finally, I wanted to mention that we're working on a new second generation Allegra valve. The biggest change here is going to be that we have an elaborate seal, so it's a PVL skirt mechanism that is not consuming space, so we can use the same delivery system, we can use the same introducer sheets for all three valves, but it's like a V-shape PVL solution, and it's been also tested in vitro and has pretty good outcomes. We'll see how it works in real practice in clinical trials, because it's being subjected to another trial, Empire 2. Another thing that is going to be changed is the larger valve. So the 31 valve is going to have a more similar design as the 23 and the 27 valve. Apart from that, we're going to keep the same design on the Allegra. This is the Empire 2, which is ongoing. First patient in was in November 23. The CRO is actually KCRI in Poland, but Kourkoveli is the core lab on Ireland. We have Spain, Germany, Finland, Ireland, France, and Poland, and Italy taking part. So hopefully this will be finished by the end of this year, or maybe beginning of next year. So to summarize, we will have more randomized data soon to be available that focuses on the hemodynamic performance of the Allegra valve in small anatomies and valve in valve. We will have the results for Empire 2, which is where the investigational device was the new delivery system. It will be presented at London Valves in this year, and hopefully we will have CMR approval for the Imperial delivery system soon. Thank you so much for your attention.
Okay, thank you very much. Allegra is a rather new kid in the block in the Greek market. So, does anybody have any question about Allegra? Any of the moderators or of the any other?
Comment?
Yes, John.
Yes, very nice meeting. I want to thank the organizing committee. Sorry, I'm not there. I had a problem with the hospital, and I was really in Iran. So now I was impressed for this demonstration of the characteristics of this new valve, and the bench testing was really impressive. But I want to ask Dr. Jonsson, just one summarizing all this. What is the one case that your first thought, your first choice would be Allegra device? What is the best case for this new device? What do you think is the best case for choosing Allegra?
Yeah, that's a good question, and it's a very easy question to answer. It's precisely what we saw from the previous presentation. Small anatomies, valve in valve would be my choice, because that's when you have, better hemodynamics. There's no doubt. That is what I would focus on. I understand the competition is fierce on the TAVI side. There's no doubt. We have a lot of good systems. We have a lot of good technologies. If you ask me, I think we're the best valve for small anatomies. Then, if you become good at it, it's of course good in any other anatomies as well. But then the differences starts to equilibrate. So of course that's at the discretion of what you're, as an operator. If you're used to one system and you have your own patient in front of you, you got to ask yourself, why do I want to invest time and effort learning a new system? Why am I doing this? And is it worth it? But when it comes to small anatomies and valve, and I think we will have the data pretty soon, this is the best valve. No surprise, I'm working for Biosensors, but this is what I think.
Mr. Jonsson,
yes. My question is about the radial force of the valve for using in heavy calcified valve. This is the question about the radial force.
Radial force is just the same as for any other valve. I think I see your point. What I mentioned in the presentation is that we have the radial force is located up to the markers. So what I think the mistake you can make, and this is important, is that if you make a low implantation, or if you don't get the valve where it should be actually, then you're not taking advantage of the radial force. I hope you understand what I'm saying, you know, because you have a slightly more flexible outflow portion of the frame, where the radial force is not as great as where, you know, up to the markers where the inflow portion is. So of course, if you do low implantations, then you could have a problem. That's number one. But it shouldn't really be a problem, because you want the valve implanted in the right position. You know, there's of course some room for compromise, but pretty much you want the valve to be implanted in the correct position. The second thing is that we do recommend pre-dilatation, because we get our radial strength towards the end of expansion. So if you haven't pre-dilated and you can't get the initial expansion, then you're not maximizing your radial force with Allegra. I think this is a very important detail in the design of the valve, but this is something we need to maximize the benefits of the effective orifice area and the good hemodynamics of the valve. So this is something we don't really want to change, because we do believe that we have, you know, the best possible effective orifice area when the valve is implanted this way. I hope I answered your question. I'm not sure, but I hope so.
Yes, okay. Thank you very much.
Any other question?
One short comment. Based on publications, Dr. Jonsson, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, based on publications, there is a very unique, a very fantastic 0% coronary obstruction. Do you believe that this is another unique characteristic of your valve, or it depends on the patients again, as to all the other valves we have available?
Again, you know, I wish I was an independent clinician, because I could speak with more credibility probably, you know, but I do believe that we have, you know, that's another feature. We have a great solution for minimizing the risk of coronary compromise. You know, we keep track on all our procedures in our own registry. It's called the IRIS database. And as I mentioned in my presentation, we're becoming the go-to valve for valve-in-valve and small anatomies. That is our niche. And this is, of course, the patients where you run a risk of having a coronary occlusion, as you probably, I mean, as you well know. And we have not had one single coronary occlusion, you know, and this is a fact, because our IRIS database is something we continuously subject to the regulatory authorities. So we don't have 30-day follow-up in our database, but we have acute results in our database, and we have had no coronary occlusions. And if you also learn how to do commissure alignment, you're minimizing the risk of coronary occlusion even more. Of course, we also say no to some patients where we think the risk of coronary occlusion is obvious. That's no discussion. We do say no sometimes to patients when we communicate with our clinicians and our operators who use the device. But of course, the centers who have gained a lot of experience with Allegra, they do what they want. You know, they've done more than 100 cases, and this is the feedback we get, that if they are concerned about coronary occlusion and they have, you know, the back against the wall and they don't know what to do with the patient, they go for an Allegra. And we have not had one single coronary occlusion. So I do think that design is good for avoiding coronary compromise. Again,
okay. Thank you, Dr.
I'm working for
Jonsson.
Biosenses again, but this is a fact.
Okay. Thank you very much. We are behind of schedule.
I understand.
Thank you.
It's been very interesting questions and discussion. Thank you so much.
Very
Have
much.
a great evening in Greece. Thank you.
Next presenter is